I'm here in a load yard that we use. I got some extra equipment over here. You know, last time we talked about doing some splits, and so I have these boxes pre-set up with 4 drawn, empty comb that needs to be drawn, and 4 that are drawn, and a feeder. So these boxes here are just waiting to go on and make splits up. So I have a stack of pallets there, another stack of boxes here. Just working our way through stuff. I'm starting to get low on lids. Here are some of the 6 ways we sent to almonds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice this today. You can see some of the almond shells. Kind of neat. And these are some of the splits that I've been working on. Some of the set-offs. So we've been working our way through them, taking notes on them. All right, I just wanted to take a minute and show you basically a setup of what I'm doing when I was going through. So right now this hive here was a double deep, and there's a queen excluder in there. And we did this 4 days ago to isolate the queen, find the fresh eggs. So I've been going through it, and I just wanted to kind of go through a setup. So here's basically a setup or a split that we're working on. We have the feeder. This is a frame of honey. As you can see, that's a frame drawn, ready to get drawn out. There's extra wax painted on. This one's already drawn out, so they can polish it up and she can start laying. And the queen was on this frame here, I found. Let's see if I can pull it out. Yep, she's right there. And both sides of this has a lot of fresh eggs. And so I'm sticking her in here right now. And then this frame here is honey. So what we'll do is we'll have a frame to get drawn out, frame of brood, frame that they can polish to start laying on, 2 more frames of brood, frame to get drawn out, and then honey again. Okay, so right now there's 5 frames in there. I need to add 2 brood and 1 empty to get drawn out, and that would be a complete split. And I'm doing the same to this box down here, and that way this one will be set up. I got an extra feeder sitting here that's going to go in there. So this one's about ready to come off, and I'm going to set it up on the hive over here so I can work the bottom, go through it, get the 3 frames of brood in there, and the appropriate setup and move forward. So that's what we're working on today, is just going through these and getting them set up. Those 2 back here I already did. They're set up ready to go. They have queen on top. That's what that stands for in today's date. And so these are all separated again with queen excluders, and tomorrow I'll come here and I'll set them off and make up some more of these single stories. That's what I mean by set them off. I'll take the 2 deeps that's there, set them off, add queen to 1 because the queen's on top on the other, and then the bottom box that's left on the pallet will also get a queen. So I take a parent and 2 splits is what I've been averaging. I've been averaging about 8 to 9 frames of brood. Some are more. I did have one hive that had 13 frames of brood, so I was able to do a parent and 3 splits. These hives here that came back from almonds are heavy on the honey, so I've been pulling honey, making a box up of honey, so when I hit a couple of light hives, I can add honey to it. So I've got honey to go around. So that's what I'm doing today, and got some more work to do and continue. I put excluders in over on that pallet today, and I'm going to put excluders in this pallet before I leave. So both those will be set up for work from 4 days from now. So I'm trying to build into future work as I go too. So it's a nice day down here, as you can see. A little bit of breeze would be nice. And that's that. All right, I got to get back to it. All right, I forgot to show you something. As I go through these, it's sometimes hard to remember what's what in there. So what I do is I put a little check mark with my hive tool on frames of brood. So you can barely see it, but this one's a frame, that one's a frame. And the other thing I wanted to show you is this frame here. While there's no brood in it, I consider it a support frame. There's a lot of nectar, honey, and pollen in there, and some empty cells. So that I don't consider a full frame of honey. They have a full frame of honey down right there. And so I'm going to add this right next to it as a support frame. And then I'll put my feeder in right there, and then we'll build out. The other thing, the composition, the makeup of a brood box is very important. Honey acts like a wall. So if I were to put a frame of honey right here, the bees are going to stay to one side or the other. Typically the queen will, and she'll be laying only on that side. And the bees won't go past the honey to draw out that foundation either. So it's very important when we make these up that you have the proper composition layout of the frames within the brood chamber. So we put honey on the walls, like I showed you over here, honey on the wall, then the comb to be drawn out. The honey acts as an insulator. It also draws those bees out there so that they can get it, and they can go past that and start filling that in too. So if you put honey again in the middle, it's going to act like a divider and a wall, and it's just not the proper composition, the proper makeup of a brood chamber, brood nest that the bees would do. So I just wanted to cover that with you too. So, oh, and we're feeding pollen patties down here to help stimulate the brood rearing and keep them going. So this particular box is going to, I'm going to put the queen in, the laying queen in. This is going to be my topmost box when I make my setup. I'm going to set her off on a new home, new location with the laying queen. Okay, so when I'm done here, this hive will be, you know, probably 3 or 4 high. You know, as you can see, they're 3 now, 3 high. Okay, and there'll be queen excluders between each of them because I'm making my setup, right? So I'm gonna go, this is a setup we just made. I'm gonna go through this entire hive and make setups. Every box will be a setup separated by queen excluders, the queen on the topmost box, okay? All of them will have that same format. A day or 2 later, I come back, the bees have now equalized up and down, and I can just set them off on new homes, install new queens in the bottom boxes. The bottommost box, pay attention, this is important. The bottommost box can be your weakest split because the field force is coming back to it, and you'll have lots of bees, okay? You still want to have some brood in there, still some drawn comb so the new released queen can do her job, but it can be your weakest split, okay, because you're going to have all that field force back. The second weakest could be the one with the laying queen because she's constantly going to be generating brood. So, but that's what I'm doing here is I'm making setups. I wanted to go into the layout again of what I'm doing. You can see here in this next box, I got an empty to be drawn, empty to be drawn. This is full of honey already, so that's ready to go. I'm gonna put another thing of honey here and start putting some of that brood in. Before I do that though, I'm gonna lift this box up and set it up over here so it's up out of the way. And then I can work with it and try to keep the queen isolated. Right now I'm pretty sure the queen's down in the first box, so I got to find her down there and then get her moved and stuff. So just to reiterate, the layout of my split: honey, comb to be drawn, brood, drawn, comb to be laid in. That black one there also has some comb in it, or some brood in it, excuse me. And then these two have drawn and nectar in it, not honey, it's not capped, so it's a little extra food for them. So 2.5 frames of brood and about 2 frames of honey is about what's in there. I just finished up with this hive that we just talked about, we were just in. It's all back together. There's 3 setups made, so you can see 1, 2, 3, queen excluder, queen excluder. The queen is in the top box. We found just enough frames, maybe 9.5 frames of brood roughly in this hive, so we were able to diversify that out and the appropriate number of frames of honey. That's one thing I like about this setup here in Florida is if these hives stay here, they don't go too far out of the town, too far away from nectar sources, that in January if I throw a 3rd deep on, it will have a significant amount of honey in it. And so not only will I usually have a surplus of honey, but I'll have plenty enough to break that whole box up and diversify it across the 3 boxes so the bees have food. One thing I did notice is that the bees, while they're bringing pollen in, there's not a lot of pollen coming in. Let's see here. See if we can get down here and you can watch the entrance for a little bit. There's not a lot of pollen coming in, okay? If I can get my big head out of the way, won't have a shadow. So you can see, there's not, you see pollen coming in? There's one bee, but that's just one bee. See any others? Very few. And so that's something that you really need to think about and consider when you're making your splits, is you really need to stop and consider what food sources are out there. Nectar and pollen both need to be abundantly available for these weaker hives, that they're going to be weaker once we set them off, and they need the resources to grow. So when I end up setting these off, they're all going to get a pollen patty. And that way they have the protein, and they continue raising the brood they need. When I set them off, it's critical. When you make a split, it's critical that they get that proper nutrition and can grow. You're trying to establish a new beehive, establish a brood nest. That's one of the reasons why I like using drawn comb in the brood nest area there when I'm making these up, is so that I am establishing a brood nest. The queen can have a space immediately to lay. She's not waiting for honey to be gone or for cells to hatch. You know, she can go right to town and start building that hive right up, and it works really well. But proper nutrition is definitely a part of that. So you definitely want to think about that. I didn't see a lot of pollen stores in the hive, and that's another reason why I definitely feel I need to add some pollen patties to these. Also, the two bottom boxes didn't have feeders. I like to have feeders in all my boxes just for this reason, so when I set them off, I'm not chasing feeders down and chasing loose frames. And so I'm going to have to go pick up some in-frame feeders and pull 2 frames out and put those feeders in. And what I like to do is give them a gallon or 2 of sucrose or something similar to that, so that they, again, have everything at home right there they need, and they can just start raising brood and making baby bees. They'll sit at this stage of scale of a hive, size of a hive. They'll sit at that scale of a hive that you make them for probably a little over 30 days, okay? And that's just for the new brood cycle to hatch and the colony to grow. You probably won't see a significant growth rate till 45 to 60 days in the size of the colony. So keep that in mind. They have to take that time to reestablish themselves, get used to the new queen, her to get laying, go through that brood cycle, raise those replacement bees that they lost during that time frame, and start building the colony size back up. So again, you probably won't see that for 2 to 3 brood cycles, which would be about that 45 to 60 day mark. So that's what you're looking at here. So there's a lot of things that go into making a split. You know, you just don't throw some brood in there with fresh eggs and walk away. You need to really think about the whole aspect of it. So I got to quit gapping and get on to the next hive here and get this going. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I probably will have some few more things to say as the day goes on, and we'll try to capture them. Oh, right over here, this pallet, we set this pallet up yesterday. You can see there's a queen excluder right there. There is one down there. So we put these excluders in this pallet, and there's my note with the date that I did that on. We did that to separate the queen like I talked about in the last video. You can see here, this one says needs honey. It was a little light. So as I put those in, I'll double check a few things and look at them and make some notes on the lid and try to be prepared. And when I go to leave this yard, I got a notebook in the truck. And when I go to leave this yard, I'll write notes down in that notebook. And then at the end of the day, I'll write a summary in that notebook. And then what I try to do is create a work order for when I got to come back and touch these, right? So these were done on the 28th, so 29th, 30th, 31st, 1st or 2nd probably is when I want to come and hit these. I'll probably do it on the 2nd. But I'll create a work order for that day and say, okay, Ben, you had 1 pallet in this yard that you put the queen excluders in. Now you know what you're doing that day, right? And I'll do a work order in my notebook for the entire day, so I know where I'm headed and I have a whole game plan. So the truck can be ready, prepared, I'm prepared, and we're ready to go. We're not wasting time. So for those of you watching this and you're new beekeepers and you always ask, oh, where do I want to put my hives? Well, I like to put my hives right where my truck can drive up. Okay, if I can't drive my truck up to the hives, I'm not interested in the yard. 365 days of the year, I need truck access. So keep that in mind. You want access with something, piece of equipment to make your job a lot easier, whether it be a wheelbarrow, a wet red wagon, a lawnmower with a cart behind it, an ATV, a side-by-side, or a pickup truck. You want access with a piece of equipment. So, all right. And, oh, this is my buddy's way of marking a hive that might have an issue. That colony actually looked great, had beautiful brood, but it was definitely a lot lighter than the rest. Definitely needs some food stores. So we'll continue to work through these, and I might have some more updates as I go. All right, back again. I just got done with this back corner, and as you can tell, went from 3 boxes to 4 boxes. This thing was full of bees, full honey, full of brood. There was probably about 10.5 frames of brood. I left the bottom with some of those half frames. I probably could have pulled one of those and put it up top, but I didn't. I just needed to get the hive closed up there. Starting to get pretty rambunctious. So the top box actually needs a couple more frames of brood, and so here are my notes. I did not find the queen, but there is a queen in there. There's fresh eggs. Okay, this thing was loaded with bees. I got queen excluded between all the boxes, so I'll be able to isolate her soon and make sure I know where she is. But I couldn't find the queen. That's what the first line means up here. And then the one below it means top box needs 2 brood frames. So I know. And then the date that I made that up. Okay. The one that I started with over here that I showed you, the notes, again, the date that I made it up, but queen on top. So the queen's on the topmost box, so I know where she is when I set it off, and I know what other ones need queens for me to install. So that's that. Now, what am I going to do with the colony over here that needs 2 frames of brood? Well, it's quite simple. I'm going to go through the hive here and the hive over there and probably pull 1 extra frame of brood out of each, throw it in that one, and make it up. So that's what I plan on doing with that. And that's how you do that. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break. Looks like they got a little sugarcane fire going over there. They do that down here. They burn the sugarcane so they can harvest it. I'm going to take a little bit of a break in the truck for a few minutes, get out of the hot weather, and then probably continue, or I'll just go to a different yard and throw a bunch of excluders in to have them set up for 4 days from now. So just wanted to share that with you. Oh, also this morning when we were out moving bees, coming back out of the bee yard, Dan found an interesting print, and I took a still photo of it, and I'll put it in the video here so you can check it out. There's an interesting print in the sand, and it was a Florida panther print. So in one of our bee yards, the last couple of years, there's been sightings of Florida panther with some cubs, and last night she must have moved through. She's been in that general vicinity, that general area for, like I said, 2 years. One of the landowners have been seeing them on a regular basis, but last night on the road, the sandy dirt road that we drive in and out of, there was a Florida panther footprint. So got to kind of keep your eyes about. I'm working right now by myself. Probably won't be of any problems, no problems at all, but working by myself, so I just got to take a little extra precaution, make sure I know what's going on around me. Dan works with the crew, so he's probably pretty well safe. Again, the likelihood of anything happening is pretty low, but it's interesting, nice to see the prints, see that they're doing well.